Welcome, listeners, to this deep dive, where we'll be exploring some pretty fascinating stuff about communication, especially with children.
Oh, it's definitely an area ripe with, well, with complexities and those aha moments, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And we have some great guides for this journey, Adele Faber and Elaine Mazlish.
Hmm.
They are like the gurus, of parent-child communication. We're going to look at some excerpts from their books.
Their insights are just timeless, really. I mean, they draw on, years of research and experience, and they offer this really empathetic approach. It's about truly connecting with kids on their level.
Exactly. And one of the core ideas that really stood out to me was this emphasis on accepting a child's feelings, even, the tough ones. Like instead of trying to immediately dismiss those feelings or like jump into fix it mode.
Oh, we've all been there, right?
Totally, totally. But they're saying, hold back a bit, acknowledge those feelings first, validate them.
Makes sense. When we feel heard, we're more open to, working things through.
And they have this really striking example in one of their books. It's about a father whose son, he comes home just fuming. He wants to like just lash out at this classmate.
Oh boy, can I just picture that scene?
And instead of, lecturing the boy or telling him, oh, it's not a big deal, the dad does something really interesting. He actually mirrors the boy's anger. He says, "Wow, you sound furious. You want to hit him."
So powerful, right? Just that simple acknowledgement.
And what happens next is kind of amazing. The son, he starts to open up. He explains what happened. He tells his dad how the classmate snatched his notebook, threw it in the dirt,
Yeah.
and he even reveals this suspicion that maybe the boy thought he was the one who broke a clay project earlier.
It's like once he felt heard, he could actually process what happened, and his feelings about it.
It's almost like by acknowledging those big feelings, we give them a container, a safe space, so they don't have to erupt.
It's about creating that emotional safety, definitely. But I was thinking, what about those times when a child's words they actually hurt? Like when they say something like, "I hate you."
Oh, that cuts deep, doesn't it?
It does. And do we still validate those expressions?
It's a tricky one. And Faber and Maslish, they acknowledge this. They say it's normal to feel hurt by those words, but they suggest responding honestly about how we feel while still, respecting the child's right to their anger.
Right. So maybe saying something like, "I see you're very mad at me and that hurts my feelings, but it's okay to feel angry."
Exactly.
There
Setting those limits, but keeping that space for emotional honesty.
is finding that balance, right? So moving on, let's shift gears a bit and talk about what Faber and Maslish say about alternatives to punishment. This is where they really challenge some conventional thinking.
It's a bit of a paradigm shift for many, for sure.
Because a lot of us, I mean, we were raised with this idea that punishment is how children learn right from wrong.
That was the prevailing wisdom, wasn't it? It was. But Faber and Maslish, they present evidence that punishment, well, it often backfires. It can lead to resentment. And instead of understanding the consequences of their actions, children become more focused on, well, on not getting caught.
Right. It becomes about avoidance rather than understanding.
Exactly. And they have this really vivid scenario where a father finds out that his son, he used his saw without asking, and he left it out in the rain, so it's all
Oh,
rusty.
no, a classic dad scenario.
The dad, he launches into this whole lecture about responsibility and lying, and he ends up grounding the boy. But what's the result? The son, he just feels unfairly accused. And he hasn't actually learned anything about taking care of tools. All he's learned is to be more sneaky next time.
It illustrates the limitations, really, of that punishment-focused approach.
So what do they propose instead?
Well, they advocate for letting children experience the natural consequences of their actions.
And I think that's an idea that, a lot of us kind of intuitively understand. Like, if a child forgets to bring home a library book, instead of scolding them, you explain that they can't borrow another one until that book is returned.
Right. The consequence becomes a matter-of-fact outcome. It's not punitive.
It encourages them to think about their choices, right?
Exactly. However, sometimes natural consequences, well, they're just not feasible, or maybe they're not effective in a given situation, so then what?
And that's where Faber and Maslish introduced this fantastic concept of problem solving. Instead of imposing a solution or resorting to punishment, we engage children in finding a solution together, something that works for everyone.
Collaboration over confrontation, you could say.
And they break it down into 5 really clear steps. First, we acknowledge the child's feelings and needs. Then we articulate our own. And then comes the fun part. We brainstorm solutions together, like actually writing down all the ideas, no matter how silly they seem.
No judgment, just pure creative flow.
And then we discuss the ideas. What do we like? What don't we like? And finally, we choose the solution we want to implement.
It sounds incredibly empowering, like you're turning discipline into a team effort.
It is. It's so different. So let's say, for example, my son Bobby, he's always coming home late from the park, even though we have a set time. So instead of yelling or giving him those endless warnings, I can say, Bobby, I worry when you're late because I don't know where you are. And I know you wish you could stay at the park longer.
Beautifully stated. You've acknowledged both his needs and your own right there.
And then what do I say? Something like, let's brainstorm some solutions to this together.
That's it. And then, grab a piece of paper, some crayons, whatever works, and start jotting down every suggestion, even the ones that seem totally out there.
No judgment, just ideas. Right?
Exactly. That's where the magic happens. Bobby might suggest getting a watch, calling when he's ready, setting a timer. You could propose having dinner later, checking on him at a specific time. The possibilities are endless.
And then we go through the list and figure out what might actually work, and ultimately we agree on a plan together.
It's amazing how effective this can be, but what happens if, let's say, Bobby just refuses to participate in the whole problem-solving process?
The classic refusal to cooperate.
Right. Faber and Mazlish, they address that too, especially when it comes to teenagers. They recommend offering a choice. Problem solve now or later, but emphasizing that, the issue needs to be addressed.
Makes sense.
And above all, staying calm, avoiding those power struggles.
It's about respect, ultimately. And speaking of respect, let's delve into Faber and Maslish's ideas on fostering autonomy in children, those skills that are they're foundational for self-reliance.
Yes, autonomy, that beautiful dance between, dependence and independence.
And what's so cool is that they highlight how every single day is just filled with these little opportunities to help kids rely more on themselves.
Like those tiny moments we often overlook, right?
Right. Instead of, swooping in to fix everything, they encourage us to let children grapple with challenges, make those age-appropriate choices, and come up with their own solutions.
Giving them that space to stumble and learn.
They even say that giving kids choices, even seemingly insignificant ones like picking between a red shirt or a blue shirt, those things contribute to their sense of agency.
It's about those small wins, those moments of, I did that.
And they also caution against overwhelming kids with tons of questions, especially those "did you have fun?" types of questions, which can actually feel like pressure.
Oh, I'm so guilty of that.
I know, me too. But they suggest just observing and listening and trusting that children will share what's important to them in their own time.
Letting go of that need to control the narrative.
Exactly. And then, this is a good one, they talk about resisting the urge to immediately answer every question. Instead, they encourage us to, encourage resourcefulness, like maybe the child could look in a book or try experimenting to figure things out.
Fostering that sense of curiosity and problem solving.
Right. It's about cultivating that I can figure this out attitude. And speaking of confidence, let's talk about praise. It's something that, is often touted as this key ingredient for boosting self-esteem. But is it really that straightforward?
That's a great question. And, Faber and Mazlish, they offer a bit of a different perspective on this whole praise thing.
It's kind of counterintuitive, right?
It is, because they actually point out how even well-intentioned praise can backfire sometimes.
For example, if I constantly tell my daughter, "You're such a gifted artist,"
Yeah.
she might start feeling this pressure to live up to that label, and she might avoid taking risks or trying new things because she's afraid of failing.
Or she might become so dependent on external validation that she never develops that internal sense of accomplishment.
So then what's the alternative? How do we use praise in a way that genuinely nurtures a child's self-esteem?
Well, Faber and Mazlish recommend focusing on what they call descriptive praise, rather than just giving those empty evaluations. So instead of saying, "good job," or "you're so smart," we describe what we see or how we feel. Like you might say, "I see you work so hard on that drawing and you use so many colors," or "I love how you experimented with different brush strokes."
It's about being specific.
Right, exactly. By describing what we observe, we help children develop their own appreciation for their efforts and their accomplishments, and we're not creating that dependence on external approval.
That makes a lot of sense. And what about praise that sort of hints at past weaknesses, like "I'm so proud you finally cleaned your room"?
Ouch, I can feel the sting of that one.
Even though it's meant well, it can still bring up those old feelings of inadequacy.
Right. So instead of focusing on the finally, you could try saying something like, your room looks so organized. It must feel great having everything in its place.
It's acknowledging the present accomplishment without dredging up the past struggles.
And that can make a world of difference. They also caution against, well, against being too enthusiastic with our praise. Like if a child constantly hears, you're the best, you're amazing, it can actually create anxiety, this pressure to live up to those expectations.
And it's important to remember, to be prepared for repetition. If I praise my son for building a tall block tower, he's probably going to want to build 100 more.
Oh, absolutely. Praise can be a powerful motivator. And like any tool, it's best used selectively and genuinely. They share this wonderful story about a teacher who helped a little boy named Jonathan learn to clap for
Not
himself.
for himself. I love that. Tell me more.
So Jonathan, he was this little boy who was always seeking his teacher's approval. After every task he completed, he would ask, is it good? One day, he finished coloring a picture, and as usual, he asked, is it good? And instead of evaluating his work, the teacher described what she saw, highlighting the colors he used and how carefully he stayed within the lines. But Jonathan, he wasn't satisfied. He said, but you didn't clap for me. And the teacher, she had this brilliant response. She said, Jonathan, you can go to the bathroom and clap for yourself. Now, Jonathan, he looked a bit puzzled, but he went to the bathroom. And a few moments later, the teacher heard this round of applause coming from the bathroom. And when Jonathan came out, he was beaming.
Such a simple yet powerful lesson, right?
It is. It reminds us that true self-esteem comes from within, not from constantly seeking external validation.
And it highlights the importance of encouraging children to recognize and celebrate their own achievements.
Giving them that inner applause.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground, haven't we? Accepting feelings, alternatives to punishment, encouraging autonomy, the art of praise. It feels like we've acquired this whole new toolkit for communication, one that fosters connection and empowerment.
It's a great foundation for building stronger relationships, for sure. But there's one more piece of the puzzle we need to explore, and that's the role of rules and labels.
Ah, yes. The labels we often unknowingly place on children.
The shy one, the troublemaker, the athlete, and so on.
And the thing is, these labels, even the ones that seem positive, they can become these self-fulfilling prophecies, shaping a child's self-perception and sometimes limiting their potential.
They can create these boxes that kids feel trapped in.
Right. So, for instance, if I'm always telling my son, you're such a messy kid, he might just resign himself to that identity and stop trying to be tidy.
Or if I repeatedly tell my daughter, you're a natural leader, she might shy away from situations where she feels less in control, because she's afraid of not living up to that label.
So how do we break free from these limiting roles and help children see themselves differently?
Well, Faber and Mazlish, they have a really insightful approach to this, and we'll delve into that in our next segment. Makes you think, it's like we approach these interactions with a toolbox, looking for the right technique to fix whatever the problem is. But Faber and Mazlish, they remind us that it's not about techniques, not really. It's about creating this atmosphere of respect and empathy, truly connecting with the child.
That really hits home. It's like shifting our focus from trying to control their actions to understanding the feelings and needs behind those actions.
Exactly. Kids, they're just like us, right? They want to feel heard, understood, respected.
It's about giving them that safe space to express all those big, messy emotions without feeling judged or punished.
Speaking of big emotions, one of the toughest things as a parent, right, is dealing with those explosive meltdowns, those moments when logic just flies out the window and you're facing this tiny human who seems completely irrational.
Oh, those moments when you question your sanity and wonder if you're the only parent struggling with the tantrum monster.
We've all been there. And Faber and Maslish, they have this really interesting suggestion for handling these situations. They call it mirroring the child's intensity.
Mirroring their intensity. So does that mean I, like, throw myself on the floor and start wailing along with them?
Not quite, no. It's not about mimicking their behavior exactly, but it's about acknowledging the intensity of their emotions in a way that feels authentic to you.
So let's say my daughter's having a complete meltdown because her favorite pink shoes got wet. Instead of saying, oh, honey, it's okay, you have other shoes, I might try something like, oh, no, your pink shoes are soaked. Those are your favorite ones. Ugh. I wish we could dry them right now.
Exactly. You're validating her disappointment without minimizing her feelings.
And avoiding logic, which, let's face it, rarely works in the heat of the moment.
Sometimes a little humor can be surprisingly effective too. There's this story about a mom whose son was having a meltdown because it was dinner time and he wanted to go to the park. And she dramatically drops to the floor next to him and exclaims, "5 minutes feels like an eternity when you're starving. It's like you could die from hunger." And she even starts pounding her fists on the floor and says, "We need sustenance now."
That's hilarious. Did it work?
It did. The son was initially taken aback, but then he just burst out laughing.
It's like she disarmed the whole situation with this playful absurdity.
Right. It's a good reminder that sometimes to deal with intense emotions, we need a little compassion, creativity, and a willingness to step outside our usual responses.
It's about joining them in their world, not trying to drag them into ours.
And when those emotions become too overwhelming to handle in the moment, there's another technique they suggest called giving in fantasy.
Giving in fantasy.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this one.
So imagine your child wants something that's simply not possible in that moment. It could be a toy, a treat, a trip to the zoo, whatever. And instead of engaging in a power struggle or trying to reason with them, you enter their world of fantasy and grant them their wish, imaginatively.
Okay, so if my son is demanding ice cream right after we've had dessert, instead of saying no and starting a battle, I could say something like, you know what? I wish we had a giant mountain of ice cream right now. We could build an ice cream castle and slide down ice cream slopes. What flavor would your castle be?
You got it. It might seem silly, but it acknowledges their desire without actually giving in to their demands.
It's like saying, I see you, I hear you, and I understand how much you want this. And by engaging their imagination, you create this playful connection that can diffuse the tension.
There's a lovely story about a mom whose daughter was heartbroken because her older sister had eaten the last peanut butter granola bar. The mom tried everything, offering to buy more, explaining it was an accident, reminding her to use her indoor voice, but nothing worked. Then she remembered this giving in fantasy technique, and she said, "You know what? I wish we had a magical granola bar tree growing in our backyard. We could just pluck as many peanut butter granola bars as we wanted. What would your dream granola bar be like? Chocolate chips, sprinkles." And at first, the daughter was skeptical. But slowly, she warmed to the idea and started describing this elaborate fantasy granola bar.
Amazing. It's like by tapping into her imagination, the mom created this space where her daughter could safely express those big emotions and even have some fun with them.
It's a reminder that during a meltdown, connecting with a child sometimes means letting go of logic and reason and entering their world of make-believe.
This is such a different way of thinking about discipline and communication. It's not about controlling behavior. It's about understanding the emotions and needs that drive that behavior.
And creating that safe space for those raw emotions to come out without fear of judgment or punishment.
It's about meeting them where they are, emotionally.
Speaking of meeting them where they are, let's talk about playfulness, which is an area where Faber and Mazlish really shine. They remind us that play is not just frivolous. It's a powerful tool for learning, connecting, and even working through challenges.
I love that they bring this element of fun and lightness into parenting. It's a good reminder that even when things are tough, there's always space for laughter and connection.
One of their suggestions for incorporating playfulness is to make inanimate objects talk.
Oh, I love this idea.
Imagine socks whining, "Oh, won't someone please put me on their feet? I feel so flat and lonely." Or toys complaining, "I'm abandoned here on the floor. I miss my friends in the toy box."
Or a bar of soap crying, woe is me, I long for dirty hands to clean.
It's so silly, but it appeals to a child's sense of humor and imagination.
And it takes the pressure off those power struggles. It's not you, the parent, demanding that they wear socks, put away their toys, or wash their hands. It's the socks, the toys, and the soap expressing their needs in a playful way.
Turning those mundane tasks into a game.
Speaking of games, another area that can be tricky for parents is dealing with competition and those sore loser moments. You know, when a friendly game of Candyland turns into a tearful meltdown.
Leaving us wondering, did I do something wrong? Why can't my child handle losing? Faber and Mazlish have a really refreshing perspective on this. They remind us that kids, especially younger ones, are still developing those emotional regulation skills. Winning and losing can feel very abstract and emotionally charged.
So instead of focusing on teaching good sportsmanship, They suggest creating a more fun, less competitive play environment.
One parent shared this clever strategy of using a stopwatch to time the kids completing a challenge or an obstacle course. So each child is competing against their own best time, not against each other.
I love that. It shifts the focus from winning or losing to personal growth and achievement.
Right, they get to enjoy the process without comparing themselves to others. Another parent recommended playing cooperative games where everyone works together towards a common goal.
Oh, like those games where you have to work as a team to solve a puzzle or build something?
Yeah,
I love those.
exactly. They encourage teamwork, communication, problem solving. And there's no winner or loser, so everyone feels good.
It's a much more inclusive and enjoyable experience for everyone. As we've been talking about all these different techniques, the biggest takeaway for me is the importance of self-awareness as a communicator.
Couldn't agree more. It's about recognizing our own triggers, our own reactions, our own patterns of communication.
Noticing those moments when we're reacting out of frustration, exhaustion, or even our own unresolved childhood stuff.
And choosing to pause, take a breath, and respond in a more conscious and compassionate way.
Remembering that we're all human, we're all going to mess up sometimes. But every interaction is a new opportunity to learn, grow, and connect more deeply with the people we love.
And it's about remembering that anger itself isn't the problem. It's how we express it. As long as we're expressing our anger without attacking the child, it's okay.
So instead of saying something like, "You're so careless, you always leave your stuff everywhere," I could try. "I get frustrated when I find your wet towel on my bed. Please remember to hang it up in the bathroom."
Perfect example. You're communicating your feelings directly without resorting to blame or shame.
And you're giving specific instructions about what needs to change, which honestly feels a lot more effective than those vague complaints or those personal attacks.
Definitely. Clarity is key. And another interesting thing Faber and Mazlish talk about is the power of eliminating but from our vocabulary. I mean, think about it. We've all been on the receiving end of those yes, but statements that they kind of diminish our experience.
Like, "I understand you're upset, but you need to calm down." Or, "I know you're tired, but you have to finish your homework."
It's like those buts. They act as emotional erasers. They negate everything that came before them.
So what do we say instead?
Faber and Mazlish, they suggest replacing but with the problem is.
Okay, so instead of, "I know you don't want to go to the doctor, but you're sick and we need to go," it would be something like, "I realize you don't want to go to the doctor. The problem is you're not feeling well, and we need to figure out how to help you feel better."
Exactly. You're acknowledging their feelings while still addressing the need for action.
It's amazing how such a small linguistic shift can make such a big difference in how the message is received.
It's all about the nuance. And one final point they emphasize is avoiding those martyrdom statements that, well, let's be honest, we all tend to fall into, especially when we're tired or stressed.
Oh, those, I've told you a million times there. Do I have to do everything around here?
Those classic guilt trips, they don't really help anyone.
They just create resentment and defensiveness.
Exactly. And instead of those, they encourage us to clearly and directly state our needs or expectations.
So instead of saying, "Ugh, I'm so tired of cleaning up after you, why can't you ever put your things away?" I might say, "I need your help keeping our home tidy. Please put your shoes in the closet and hang your backpack on the hook."
Perfect. It gets the message across in a way that's respectful and effective.
Wow, this exploration into Faber and Maslish's work has been, well, it's been eye-opening, to say the least. It's like we've been given this incredible blueprint for building stronger, more connected relationships.
And it all boils down to remembering that communication, it's not just about the words we use, but the intention behind those words. It's about creating a space where everyone feels heard, understood, valued.
It's about approaching those challenging moments with curiosity and compassion, being willing to try something different.
And remembering that we're all on this journey together, constantly learning and growing and deepening our connections with those we love. And with that, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into the world of Adele Faber and Elaine Mazlish.
It's been quite a journey, and I encourage all of you listening to pick up their books and explore their insights further. You won't regret it. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, happy communicating.